Welcome to Constant Variables, a podcast where we take a non-technical look at what it takes to build and grow digital products. I'm Tim Bornholt. Let's get nerdy. Quick note before we get into this week's episode, we at the Jed Mahonis Group have a lot of fun projects coming in the door, and as a result, we're looking to expand our team. We're looking to hire an Android developer. So we at JMG place an emphasis on hiring for fit as opposed to skills. Skills are something that can be taught and fostered through mentorship and experience. Fit, on the other hand, it's a lot harder to define, but we've outlined some of the traits we're looking for on our careers page. It's over at jmg.mn/careers. So whether you have 1 year of experience or 20 years of experience, it doesn't really matter. If you're interested in talking and or working with us, please reach out at careers@jmg.mn. We'll put that email address and a link to our careers page in the show notes as well. Today we are chatting with Anand Safi. Anand is an engineering manager for Mark43, a public safety software company. Anand's career journey from software engineer to software manager was rather intentional, but for many software engineers, they don't want to become managers. So in this podcast, we talk about other options for promoting your best engineers, as well as how Toastmasters helped him become a more empathetic speaker, how to deal with non-technical bosses, hey, that might be you, dear listener, and how to juggle innovation with maintaining what you've already got. So, without further ado, here is my interview with Anand Safi. Anand, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim, for having me. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here as well. I'd love for you to take a chance to introduce yourself and what you do at Mark43 and just talk about everything that's led you to this wonderful podcast interview we're about to have.
Sure thing. Yeah. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, as I said. So I am Anand Safi. I currently am an engineering manager at Mark43. For those of you who are not aware, Mark43 is a public safety SaaS company. So we have some of the world's most powerful software, which is to empower communities and their governments with new technologies and solutions that would improve the safety and quality of life for all. So basically, we have 911 dispatch solutions to record management solutions, and just more products that would kind of just make our community safer and just improve the quality of life. Along with my role of being an engineering manager, I'm also involved in the tech community in various forms. I do mentorship and coaching for engineering leaders and also for new and aspiring engineers through a couple of platforms. And then I also am a startup advisor for a couple of pre-seed angel round companies. And just along with being present in the tech community, that's when I came across this wonderful podcast for Constant Variables, and I thought it would be amazing to just come on the show and have a chat with Tim and share about my experience and see what comes out of it.
Right. You are too kind. I'm really curious, like, as I've never spoken to somebody who works on software for like the 911 or like the public safety sector. So could you talk a little bit about, like, are there any unique challenges or anything that you face dealing with software that could potentially, have life altering consequences if things don't work the right way?
Yeah, I think you put it really well, the life-altering consequences. That is exactly kind of the top thing on our mind at Mark43. That is security, uptime, and then also accuracy. So a huge part of our, saying that CAD software, for example, the 911 dispatch, is the location accuracy for our first responders when they're responding to an event, actually. The other thing is the uptime and also making sure that the Mark43 software is able to keep up with the demands at peak times for the dispatchers, actually. So that is a core area of focus for us, that along with product initiatives, we put a huge focus on the technical initiatives, and also trying to make sure that we are innovating and coming up with new ways to just make this secure and scalable and robust, because as I said, like, this has a fundamental impact on our communities.
Yeah, totally. Is there like just anytime when you're working with software like that has uptime requirements, I'm sure that there's extra lengths that you go to. Is there any any tips or any advice, like, because I know uptime and security and things, like all apps obviously need to be secure and have high availability, but is there any, like, if I'm in the shoes of somebody that's non-technical and I'm trying to figure out, like, how do I build a technical team that's going to focus on those things? Do you have any tips of, like, what to look for, or like what kind of software or what kind of just mindset that your development team should be in when you have that kind of a need?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. Thanks for bringing that up. I think related to what some folks could do, and a mixture of what we currently do is, I would say two things. First, be as much close to your customer or your target user as possible. So we have some wonderful relationships and partnerships with the police agencies and government agencies that we work with or that are our customers. So trying to get feedback or trying to understand their workflows in terms of what is necessary to, like, absolutely core workflow that they need, and making sure that those have the right tracking, the right kind of metrics, and the kind of monitoring setup is key, actually. And then the second is also establishing internal SLAs and just uh, goals for your own engineering practice and team, that you should strive to meet, and then try to work backwards. So trying to see what are the current gaps and potential improvements and performance gains that could be made, and then trying to focus initiatives along those SLAs that you feel comfortable and proud of, and then are also kind of working in favor of the customer that you're catering the solution to.
Right on. That those are really good pieces of advice. If you're trying to be building software in that same space, I think those are two really great tips to take away. As an engineering manager, you obviously have a lot of commitments between being a manager, but also, I assume you're doing some technical work, still engineering of some sort. So how do you balance those two commitments that you have within your company?
Yeah, I think that is kind of a constant challenge for any engineering manager, especially for those who come from an engineering IC background or who want to continue to stay technical, because you have this new or added people management or kind of non-technical responsibilities that are equally important, actually. So there is a balancing act that needs to happen. And I think there's just a lot of great approaches that people have taken, but I think what I can say is it differs from company to company, role to role, and if I may, even team to team, based on what you're working on, what your ideal team setup is, and the mix of people that would kind of just, I would say, guide on how much manager versus maker's time you would have. So for my particular role and my experience currently at Mark43, it revolves around wearing many hats. So while my primary goal is definitely to kind of be that engineering lead on the projects that I manage and make sure that they are progressing from a technical standpoint. But equally, it also means that I need to be a strong advocate of my team, any considerations for work life balance, trying to not will cause any burnout, and trying to just reasonably set expectations from the get-go. That also means that I have to spend time doing rigorous planning and strategy work from the technical roadmap standpoint with my leadership and other stakeholders. So I closely collaborate with the product and design team in that regard. So the role keeps on getting fragmented in terms of time commitments. It's, I think, a mix of 3 to 4 core commitments in that regard. But to your point, that I still need to stay technical at the end of the day. And personally, how I achieve it is with a mix of few things. So I don't have that luxury most days where I could say this is my afternoon blocked, and for the next 3 to 4 hours, I will just be heads down time coding. I probably get segments of 30 to 45 minutes or pockets of time throughout the day or week. So during that time, I do PR reviews as much as I can to see what code is going out. Are we following the best practices that we have set up as an engineering organization? I do the engineering huddle meetings with my team of engineers. So trying to make sure that we are all on the same page and just kind of working towards the same uh, goal. And I also take active part in architecture discussions or any brainstorming sessions, actually. Along with that, I would love to also do some amount of coding that is either in the form of really small feature development or bug fixes, but not taking up on large refactors or large feature development, because given my time commitments and the fact that I might spread too thin on multiple things, I don't want to end up being a bottleneck for the team's progress.
I can 100% relate to that that feeling of like you still want to be able to jump in and help out with the code and do some reviews and like I totally understand that. And then from the other side, you also have to make sure that stuff is actually getting out the door. One thought that I had going through my head while you were explaining that was just thinking of the kind of listener that listens to this podcast is typically not a technical person, but might actually be managing technical people. And I wonder what advice you would have, like, saying like, for example, like if you had a new boss that came into your work and wasn't technical, but had all these lofty expectations of you for being both a manager of people, but also a manager of the product and the technical side of things. How do you deal with, how would you approach a boss that comes to you and doesn't really understand what you do and trying to help get your time set up? Like, how would you wrap your mind around that for somebody else?
Yeah, I think that's a excellent question. That is the kind of most practical situation that most teams face. That as you go higher up in the leadership, they're probably more and more detached to the day-to-day problems or the happenings of at a team level or at the code level. And there are big initiatives that we want to make happen, but sometimes the team is just not set up to deliver in the time frame or the fashion that is expected. So the ways I have dealt with that is just early on in the role, or like any new team or project that you take up, just do spend the time to establish relationships and trust with the people that either you will be managing or whom you would be sharing information or reporting to. That will help us be on the same page in terms of just what are reasonable expectations and what is kind of your guiding light in terms of who should be the decision maker. What I mean by that is the fact that you lead technical people does not mean that you are the technical lead for that team, actually. Uh, there's a clear distinction between managing a team versus managing systems and technical architecture. So I think I would still very much want the most senior engineer or a group of senior engineers on the team or project to be those tech leads or the acting tech lead that will provide me key input, and I will heavily rely on them to make a decision versus just because I was managing the team, uh, whatever I feel or I have like a just an assumption based on my past experience should be the way forward, actually. So the fact that somebody else is a lead from a systems and technology standpoint should be okay for you, and that will help move the team quicker versus you thinking that just because you manage a team you also manage the engineering decisions as a part of that team.
Yeah, it's so hard. Like technology in general is so confusing to so many people, and having somebody like that in a position where you can kind of be like a Rosetta Stone, for lack of a better term, of somebody who can translate from what's happening, what needs to happen from a business standpoint, but what is possible from a technology standpoint. You're often in this kind of perilous situation where you're not exactly friends with anyone because you kind of have to make both sides upset upset from time to time. So I think that the point that you made about establishing good relationships and just having that ability to be open and honest and garner some empathy from both sides, so that it's not it so often becomes this adversarial us versus them, the upper management versus the technology providers, and it doesn't need to be that way. I think, just like you said, establishing some clear communication and making sure that who's in charge and where the buck stops at the end of the day. Those are really great points for making sure that your team is on the right track to achieving business goals and getting the job done.
Yeah, and now that you say it that way, I just wanted to add one more thing. I think a easier way to just approach it would be, say the roadmap and the vision is top down, if we may, in that sense, like the strategy and the vision setting on what we need to do is probably more top down, where you can rely on your management and leadership. But in terms of how we do it and what is a reasonable time frame in terms of technical feasibility and delivery, should be definitely more bottom up to people who are more closer to the day to day implementation.
Oh, yeah, that's a really great point. I think the more you can actually listen to the people that are on the ground dealing with the software and seeing the problems. I mean, even if they're not getting direct insight into a particular feature or anything, just having the perspective that somebody else is coming from, whether it's the management or marketing or whoever in an organization, like just having those kinds of information coming to you as a technology provider, like as a developer, there's so many micro decisions developers make day to day that knowing the why behind a decision instead of just knowing the decision can sometimes lead to better outcomes at the end of the day for the product too. So I think that's a really great point.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100% with what you said.
Nice. So, moving on a little bit, you are a former club president of Toastmasters. I've definitely heard of Toastmasters, and I'm vaguely aware of what they do. But I'd love for you to explain what it is and what kind of led you to get involved and what impact that's had on your career.
Yeah, I think it was not something that I planned or always wanted to do. As you said, also vaguely heard of it when I got involved with it, but it just presented as an opportunity that I felt was just now that I look back, I think it was one of the most rewarding moments or probably steps in my career journey. The way it has had experience or just influence on my own public speaking, communication, or just collaboration skills actually. So to talk about Toastmasters itself, it is basically a nonprofit which is helping to empower people, literally anyone in the entire world. It's not limited to an area, a country, or just a state, or just zones. It's basically a global nonprofit where it teaches public speaking and leadership skills. Uh, and the way it does it is has a network of clubs. So there are these Toastmasters chapters or clubs that you could be a part of. And when I joined, it was more than 15,000 clubs around the world and more than 125 plus countries. So it is there around close to 100 years now. Actually, I think they were started in 1924 or five, and over the last 100 years, actually almost 9 decades or so, they have helped people just become better at public speaking and develop confidence and be better at communication. The differentiator with Toastmasters versus other things that offer similar things is I really feel that their mission is unique, that it has diversity and inclusion baked in. Uh, Toastmasters meetings were some of the time where some of the times where I felt people were the most vulnerable in terms of sharing their experiences, trying to just open up about their success and failures. Actually, people were most embracing of each other's experiences. So uh, failure was considered kind of more valuable to share because there were a lot of learnings for people to take that they don't repeat those mistakes again in that matter. It also was very impromptu. So each club had kind of a structure of like a president, secretary, treasurer, and just little kind of meetings on the day would have different actors and roles where you could be kind of leading an impromptu group discussion for that matter. You might be leading an impromptu Q&A session actually. So it involved a lot of, I would say, thinking on foot, and it just helped me just become better at just street smartness, if I may, in terms of just not planning, pre-planning. Like I'm big on planning and organizing things, but the more I realized over the course of my career is that does not always work. In a war room situation or a production incident or something, or a software kind of patch gone wrong, pre-planning and organizing does not help at that moment. You need to decide, or you need to think on foot on what is the best course of action. You need to be more collaborative. You need to work with people's I would say, unique attributes and characteristics of all the parties involved actually to reach a consensus. So those are the things that they kind of just don't teach it. There's no formal teaching involved, but just speaking and sharing and listening to those experiences from people just kind of makes you more confident about your own experiences and taking it forward actually.
I think that's there's so many things to unpack in that because there's the vulnerability and empathy side of things. I think you're absolutely right, especially in a technical role or managing technical people. A lot of times, people that are technical by nature and think very logically have a hard time with that kind of quick changing, just rapidly evolving circumstances. And in technology, like I'm sure like I'm sure the way that you thought today would go at 9 a.m. is way different than how it is right now at 3:30 p.m. Like the day just changes and evolves,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
you have to be able to adapt. And those there isn't really like the best way to train for it is to just do it. So to be around a group of people who aren't going to judge you and you I'm sure one of the things you take away is that everybody sitting in that room is probably just as terrified as you, and you aren't paying much attention to other people, if that makes sense. Like everyone's just kind of worried about themselves, and you kind of learn like to hone that you can be vulnerable and you can put yourself out there. And most of the time, people will just be indifferent. You're kind of your own harshest critic, so to speak. And I can just say, based off of our conversation so far, it's like I can tell that you're very well spoken, and I would assume that a lot of that attribution goes right to your time at speaking at Toastmasters.
Yeah, and I can share actually. I did not touch on how I got involved with Toastmasters itself. So this was through my one of my previous roles at a company called Intent. So I was a part of the engineering team. We were based in New York City, and I was there for 6+ years actually. And I think during my year 3 or year 4, I really wanted to do something more than just engineering output. I wanted to spearhead or just kind of look at an initiative that I could help from a company culture standpoint. And one thing we quickly realized is engineers are great at writing code, but then they want it to end there, most of them. They don't want to go up on a stage, share their work, or speak with many, many people or on the company. So, what we were seeing in company town halls is the product people or the marketing people would say, we built this cool new feature and this is what we're rolling out. But we also wanted engineers to take an equal part in that, like sometimes going up and sharing, like, I built this or we built this, and this is the things that we were kind of looking for when we were writing up a solution for this problem. So we wanted people to be able to speak about the technical work they did in a non-technical fashion and just interact with a group of people. So that led to me and one of our product managers in the data science practice. So me and her went up to our VP and said, I think we should start a we think we should start a Toastmasters chapter here. We will first start with just an internal company chapter, see how much traction we get, and then that's how we started just doing the Toastmasters meetings. And it was amazing in terms of when I gave my icebreaker speech, I had people come up to me and said, we didn't know you were just as much passionate about the things you mentioned. Actually, we didn't know you were such a good speaker, because I actually am a very good listener. I might be talking a lot right now, but in most meetings at work, I used to stay really silent for the most part, because I like observing and getting a gist of the situation and things going on before giving my own thoughts and input, rather than just adding a loud voice in the mix, actually. So I'm always kind of that little bit in terms of being a listener and a little less active in meetings most of the times, because I'm trying to process and see that I can present the information in the right way. But the flip side, after work hours, when we did these meetings, we realized people had so much to share and talk about, common interest, and all those things just opened up, that it felt really productive as a company culture thing.
Yeah, it's amazing the difference in people's personalities from work to outside of work, and I think that seems like a really cool way to go about doing it. Is just having, like you said, those doing like impromptu speeches and going through the Toastmasters program. I'm sure opened up a lot of it just opened up your eyes to other people, and then also conversely that it opened up their eyes to you, and that, I think there's something really beautiful about that. I wish more tech people that were in tech were better at speaking, because I think then we would all be able to have a little more empathy with each other. And usually when you're in the tech driver's seat, it's what is it? The problem exists between keyboard and user pepcac. I can't remember what that acronym is, but you know what I'm saying? Like usually people think like, oh, it's the user's fault. They're dumb, blah, 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 blah. But when you can have a little bit of empathy by putting yourself out there and listening to other people honestly too, then that's a really great way of developing that empathy. So you can, at the end of the day, build better software.
Yeah, I think just that really helps to keep you and the team honest and accountable at the end of the day, versus the blame game. So totally agree with that.
Well, you were kind of mentioning the previous job, and you've had a career path of going from software engineer to manager, and seemed like that was a pretty intentional way of doing it. But a lot of software engineers that I know don't really want to get into management. But a lot of the ways that businesses have structured themselves, it's you kind of have to go, if you want to be promoted, you have to go from being an engineer into being a manager. What advice do you have for organizations with regards to finding a way to promote talented engineers, but keep them doing the engineering work instead of having to move into a managerial role?
Yeah, I think that's again such a valid point that our industry has faced, especially engineering organizations or just the engineering practice as a whole. Uh, I I think this is just a traditional mindset, or just kind of the thinking that has been set up for decades, that uh, because you are a manager gives you more power, authority, compensation, just the will to hire and fire people, a lot more things in terms of just seniority means management. That has been the preconceived notion for most companies. I think till fairly recently. I actually just gave a talk on this exact topic, which said from an engineer to a manager is not a promotion. It's just a different career path and role altogether. But to your point, in terms of just what organizations can do. So I do see that happening actually nowadays. The new companies that are starting, or the companies that really care about their team dynamics and culture, are starting to adopt more and more the concept of dedicated career ladders. So in terms of a career ladder being just a vertical climb, that is, you are an engineer, senior engineer, and then an engineering manager. They're more like kind of spread in all directions now. So not only you could go from being a senior engineer to, say, a principal or staff engineer, you could go to also being an engineering manager. That being said, the number one thing that organizations should do is have dedicated career ladders for an engineering IC track and an engineering management track. We do have that at Mark43. I was super impressed when I joined the team on how much work the team has put in and thought on making this a reality. There is a clear path at each level in terms of whether you are an individual contributor that is who's just starting fresh as a new engineer to a really principal staff level engineer. And on the flip side, whether you're starting as a new engineering manager to senior manager, director, VP. So each of those roles have clearly defined in a rubric fashion the things that you should or should not be doing as well. It's really important to like what are your core focus areas, but what are some things that are not your primary focus areas. So giving that clarity to the engineers is key that organizations need to put a focus on. A little bit more on that is what would be their motivation to come up with such a career ladder is that I think you need to, like as a company, need to know exactly what keeps your engineering organization motivated and interested. It can differ from engineer to engineer. Many people would like to continue to have the ability to just have heads down implementation time or just focus time without being pulled in too many directions, without fragmenting their role too much, without having a lot of things to just juggle between. They want to do one thing and they want to do one thing really well, actually. You also need to just kind of realize that at the end of the day, technology or working product is your key differentiator. You might have great talking points that your product or software does various things, but when it comes to showtime or when you need to demo it or you need to see it in working fashion, that technical kind of finesse is kind of what will dictate whether it is a winner or not, actually. And for that, you need to have continued engineering output, scalability, and innovation from the engineering practice. If you're trying to give people management responsibilities to your most senior engineers, they are not going to have the time to equally focus and do some of their most fine work from an architecture standpoint as well. So you need to embrace the notion of like who is a creator versus who is an enabler, if I may. So engineering managers, I see them as enablers. They unblock the team, they guide the people on the team and the direct reports with mentorship and coaching. But creators are still your really strong engineering ICs at the end of the day.
When you put it that way, it's really obvious why putting somebody that's a very talented engineer directly in charge of people is such a monumentous shift in mindset. Because if you are a very talented engineer and you spend most of your time in the code, that is a very specific skill set of being a creator. The skill sets required to be an enabler and to remove roadblocks and set other people, other creators up for success. It's a whole different mindset, and it's an obvious parallel would be looking at like pro athletes that move into like the management or into like the coaching roles. There's not too many pro athletes out there that become pro level caliber coaches. It's just they're two completely different mindsets, even though you would think that like Tom Brady, for example, might make a great head coach because he makes a great quarterback, but there's so much more that goes into being a head coach than just being able to throw a football and not get tackled 1,000 times. But that's neither here nor there. I think that's a really great I think that's a really great point of being a creator versus an enabler.
Yeah, and I think you put a great example to this actually in terms of some of the best coaches in the industry or any industry might not have been players themselves or might not have been as strong as a player as they are as a coach actually. So that is one thing to realize, that there is no literal translation, and because you're a player it means you would be a great coach. It's just a different skill set on just individual output versus just getting a team to do the work and just kind of fostering teamwork and collaboration. So it's just two different things at the end of the day. There is no literal mapping that good at one thing means you'll be good at automatically the other thing.
Right. And I think it's like you were saying, having the ability in your organization to allow developers, because some developers can be good managers. And some engineers like moving into that architecture role and just kind of understanding more of the stack and being higher up. And I think finding a way to, in your own organization, lay out a roadmap and several different possible career paths so that you can see a progression. That I think that's super important for non-technical folks to take away is just having a lot of different options and finding which option fits best for the individual is going to easily be the right way to do it, instead of just assuming that they're going to go from being a creator to being an enabler.
Yeah, and I think it's on companies or us as engineering leadership or teams to provide the psychological safety to your engineering talent, that just because you don't want to take up a management role doesn't mean that you are lacking anything or you would be rewarded less fairly than any other higher up role. At the end of the day, I think leadership is key, and leadership is either in terms of system or architecture leadership or in terms of people or team leadership. So there are two different things, and you need people to in both areas actually to just be successful as a team or organization as a whole.
Yep, I could not agree more with that. Jumping back over to Mark43 for a little bit, we kind of touched on this about just needing to be worrying about uptime, and there's so many different components to dealing with the software you work with. But one thing I want to hear your feedback on is when you have software that's already in use, and again, this has to be software that's has to be up and running and no crashes. How are you able to set up and foster an environment that you can continue to innovate while making sure that what you've got going is still spinning? If you think of spinning plates, making sure that you've still got all the plates spinning on the one side, and you're adding new plates onto it. Like, how do you juggle all of those concerns?
Yeah, I think this is a constant challenge for not only for us, but I think for most teams actually, because the business would love that teams keep crushing it, as they say, just put out more and more features, just add more things to the product to make it more extensive and offer a variety of things to the customers and end users actually. But at the same time, if you're just focused on feature building, uh, the technical part will not scale up actually if it's not given the love and attention it needs. So uh, there are constant efforts to make sure that we are continuing to have some form of technical innovation, some form of critical thinking, or that creative juice is flowing with the engineering team to balance the product or business expectations with just a strong technical foundation or just like a technology base. There are some ways we try to achieve this. First is we do a mix of product and tech initiatives during our planning. So we are fortunately not one of those companies or teams that is fine to accumulate tech debt as we go, as they say, and then just say, let's focus on the user facing things only. Let's not worry about what is powering those things actually. Technology or tech initiatives in general are taken very seriously at Mark43. So each planning cycle, we will be looking at what are some proposed product initiatives, what are some proposed technical initiatives, and then making sure that we are prioritizing uh, among those which are probably just most important, whether they are product or tech. So each initiative or proposal is given equal thought, weightage, and consideration before making a decision on what the team will be focusing on for the upcoming quarter in that regard. So first is just opening up a channel to make sure that technical work is always prioritized to build those systems that can have some wonderful features built on top of that actually. The second is we do hackathons or hack week. Actually, this week is hack week at Mark 43. So we are trying to give people the time to focus on something entirely different from their day-to-day work style. Whether it is coming up with your own hackathon idea and just writing with it or experimenting a new technology, or it's something totally radical where you feel let's expand into a new vertical, and then you pitch your idea actually in the company, and then you can get people from various divisions to be your team, and for 1 week you just come up with the proposal, the scope, put a POC, and then you do a pitch presentation at the end of the week actually. So some of our actual cool features have come from those wacky hackathon ideas, as we say, and that is just amazing. Like if people are not pressured in terms of this is your sprint goal, this is your weekly commitment, this is what we need to focus on, or this has a go live date, all those things get away from people's minds, then they can just focus on just building cool things actually. And that is how technical innovation is really a key part in terms of some of the feature work that has come up through these technical hackathons here at Mark 43. Last thing that we want to do is, apart from this specialized hackathons or just planning technical initiatives, during the quarter itself, we are trying to dabble or focus a little bit of dual track agile. So, what dual track agile means is a mix of discovery and delivery. So, for things that we have already planned out from a product or technical initiative standpoint, a group of people or engineers on the team might be working on delivering those core commitments actually. So the high integrity commitments that were already said that we would be doing, a mix of engineers and the product team will be focusing on delivering those commitments, which is a delivery track, while another set of people would be focusing on the discovery track. So what's next? What's upcoming? What is something else we could be doing in the future? Having those meetings, discussions, research sessions, trying to do focus groups and trying to gain more data and information from within and outside the company from our users in terms of what is that thing that we should be building next actually. So we have a discovery backlog in that regard, and that is how we can kind of stay ahead of the game or the curve in terms of doing discovery as we are doing delivery as well.
Those are really great pieces of advice if you are looking to keep your company having all those plates spinning while adding others. I think, man, there's so much to break down in those. I think the place I want to start is the notion of a hack week, or having time that you devote to just letting your team go. I people always talk about hiring for like company fit and culture and things like that, but then stifle them with just boring work or just putting things on their plate without actually giving them responsibility to, like, innovate and let their imaginations run wild. And I've seen this happen in a lot of different formats and across different organizations. Some have every Friday in the afternoon is your own time and you work on your own project, and the team comes back and pitches each other, and you get that, like, every week you get to look forward to having some of your paid time just be working on side projects. The hackathon idea is, and having a hack week is just a really smart way to do it. Like you said, I couldn't imagine how many innovations have come from those types of meetings of just, hey, I wonder if our app did this. And then, leadership can, I would imagine, like, being in the leadership role myself now, just how much fun that would be for them to just sit and be like, oh my God, like those are some really good ideas coming across.
Absolutely. We cancel all routine meetings that will happen that week normally. And it's just kind of just, yeah, think what you want in terms of, and also it does not need to be work related, right? Like it is just, I have really wanted to try a new technology or a new thing that has come up, or I really wanted to try out this product. And then from there, just, even if you just try it out and demonstrate at the pitch presentation, who knows, someone else in the company might be able to connect the dots and say, it's great you just tried this out, but there is maybe a chance that we could integrate this into our own product, or kind of we could build something similar into our own product if that is possible. So, and again, it's not only just new technology or work related things, right? It could be productivity things, like how many people come up with productivity hacks, or just improving developer efficiency, how to do better time management, how to not get distracted at work. There are just so many cool tips and tricks that come out, that as an organization that just helps us have more kind of best practices set up in terms of things that people are able to test out for a week, that it makes a real difference, and then it just becomes the norm going forward.
I love it. And then the first and third points you made about having like the making sure like while you're planning things out that you're making it a mix of new product features as well as like tech debt payoff type of features, and then having doing this dual track agile as well, of having one team like focusing on just churning through the backlog and getting things done, and then another team kind of setting up that backlog and doing all that research. I think it's the organizations that the tech companies that put an emphasis on like building out like infrastructure and focusing on infrastructure, I find are the ones that end up really being able to leapfrog everybody else. Like if you try to save all of your tech debt for one big refactor down the road, you're just setting yourself up for like a real bad time trying to get any kind of like, if you ever try to go from like Rails 3 to Rails 6 or something crazy like that, and you have to worry about how you're going to get all your databases set up, and oh, we've never written a single unit test, or just different things like that. It's you see all kinds of crazy things in technology, but yeah, the organizations that do it the best are the ones that no, I don't think I know very many developers who would say that they just love doing like maintenance and just love doing bug fixes and stuff. Everybody loves building new shiny things. That's human nature. But I think at the same time, it's human nature to not want to focus on those kinds of like upkeep and maintenance. Like everyone wants the new bridge built across the town, but nobody wants to try to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to repair the one that we have that's existing. So I don't know. I'm kind of rambling here, but I just wanted to throw on some extra points on what you were saying with having those kind of an organization that has both new features as well as maintaining existing features equally weighted in their mindset. I think that's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you bring up great points to support that, and I think uh, I really see that happening with more and more teams. And one of my last roles, as you mentioned, actually, we had the hackathon, and then we had the Friday to focus on just whatever you wanted to. Maybe it could be some cool project that another team is doing, or just pair program with another engineer in some other division, actually, just to learn something. So that 80-20 is really working, where people are saying 80% is your core commitments, but 20% is your true, I would say, innovation time in terms of just to keep you motivated and engaged, and given the time and support you need to do things that you really would want to do otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. Could not agree more. Anand, this was awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show today. Maybe you could end this off here by sharing how people can get in touch with you and learn more about the work you're doing over at Mark43.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think the best way for people to get in touch with me is through LinkedIn. I am fairly active there. I love talking with people, connecting with people. So you could find me on LinkedIn by my name, Anand Safi. I also do a lot of mentorship, formal and informal, through various platforms. You could find me on a platform called Mentor Cruise, and also on a platform called Plato HQ, really popular for engineering leadership mentoring. And then Mentor Cruise is really great for people who are fairly new in their engineering journey, or who are or people who are willing to get into their engineering journey and want to make a transition, actually. So yeah, real would love talking with you and assist in any way I can. Or also just on LinkedIn, we can just connect and then set up some time for a virtual coffee chat to talk about just team culture, engineering culture, team dynamics, and what are some ways that people are tackling these things that I shared in their own organization and role, because I think this is just a collective uh, a learning thing. It's like it takes a village to get it right. So what I shared might just be, I would say, a needle in haystack in terms of what other experiences are out there.
Well, and you mentioned being active on LinkedIn. I mean, that's you reached out to me there, and I'm really grateful that you did, because I think there's a lot of great nuggets in this episode that people are going to take away. So, Anand, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today, and hopefully we'll chat again soon here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, team, again for having me. I think I definitely learned a couple of things from your own experiences and examples as well. And really, really happy that I got a chance to talk with you and come on this Constant Variables podcast.
Thanks to Anand for joining me on the podcast today. You can learn more about him and Mark43 at mark43.com. That's Mark with the number 43.com. Show notes for this episode can be found at constantvariables.co. You can get in touch with us by emailing hello@constantvariables.co. I'm at Tim Bornholt on Twitter, and the show is at CV_podcast. Today's episode was produced by Jenny Karkowski and edited by the warm Jordan Doust. If you have a minute quick before you leave, we'd love it if you left us a review on the Apple Podcasts app. It shouldn't take much time at all, and it really does help new people find our show. So please head to constantvariables.co/review, and we'll link you right there. This episode is brought to you by the Jed Mahonis Group. If you're looking for a technical team who can help make sense of mobile software development, give us a shout at jmg.mn.